So, picture this, if you will. You are sitting in like a quintessential English pub.
Oh, the kind with the low oak beams, right?
Exactly, yeah. It smells like old spilled ale and floor wax, and there's that late afternoon sunlight just kind of streaming through a leaded glass window.
It's pretty ideal.
It really does. It's a
Yes,
beautiful,
yeah.
flawless summer day in late June. You've got a cold pint right in front of you. At your feet is your loyal dog. The world is just perfectly, wonderfully calm.
But not for long, I'm guessing.
Right, exactly. Because then a bloke sitting next to you slides over a newspaper, and he points to this tiny, bizarre clipping from a neighboring county. It's a report about a farmer. And this farmer was just nearly killed by a wasp.
But I mean, we're not talking about a normal yellow jacket here.
No, no, a wasp the size of a man's arm?
Yeah, that's terrifying.
Right. I mean, most of us would run screaming. But the protagonist of our story, he just orders another pint.
It is like the ultimate intrusion of the impossible into the completely mundane.
Wow.
You have this idyllic pastoral safety of the English countryside, and it just gets violently punctured by this B-movie horror concept.
And that jarring, terrifying juxtaposition is exactly what we are unpacking today. You, the listener, have sent us this massive stack of notes, historical context, and literary analysis on a classic piece of 1960s British science fiction.
Yeah, it's a novel called The Furies by Keith Roberts.
Right. And our mission in this deep dive is to figure out why a story that sounds, on paper, like some late-night creature feature about giant killer bugs.
Wait, it kind of is, totally.
But why it's actually one of the most accurate, devastating blueprints of how human psychology and society shatter when the world ends.
Because we're really looking at a text that uses a wildly scientifically impossible premise to explore, the fragility of civilization,
Yeah.
the absolute limits of human resilience, and this concept that was really heavily weighed on the public consciousness back in the 1960s, which is cosmic retribution.
Which we'll definitely get into. So we'll be moving from that illusion of absolute safety in a quiet village through the hubris of the nuclear age right into a grueling guerrilla war.
And finally, we'll be examining why the book's really grim, unresolved nature leaves such a lasting mark on anyone who reads it.
So let's start right there in that pub. The notes classify The Furies as a prime example of the cozy catastrophe subgenre, which honestly, on its face, it feels like a total oxymoron.
It does, yeah.
Because I look at other staples of this genre that the sources mention, like John Wyndham's The Day of the Triffids or John Christopher's disaster novels, and the whole point seems to be burning down middle-class politeness.
Right.
So I have to push back a bit here. Is Roberts just using village greens and afternoon tea to make the eventual fall hurt more? Like, is it really cozy?
Well, so the term cozy catastrophe was actually coined by the science fiction author Brian Aldiss, and he actually meant it as an insult.
Wait, really?
Okay.
Pejorative.
Yeah, exactly. He was criticizing the specific wave of British post-war science fiction where, like, the end of the world happens, but the middle-class protagonists somehow manage to survive while sipping sherry and, raiding abandoned grocery stores.
Oh, I see. Like the apocalypse, but with good manners.
Exactly. But in The Furies, Roberts subverts that completely. The coziness isn't a safety net in this book. It's an indictment.
An indictment of what, exactly?
Well, you have to remember the psychology of post-WWII Britain. I mean, they had survived the Blitz. They had endured years of rationing and this constant acute terror just falling from the sky.
Right, the V-2 rockets and everything.
Yeah, so by the time the 1960s roll around, there was this desperate cultural desire for quiet pastoral normality.
They wanted the boring, predictable pub life more than anything else in the world.
Precisely. And British sci-fi authors, they weaponized that desire. They understood that the most effective way to terrify a British reader wasn't, a sudden fiery explosion Times Square.
Right.
It was to take the village green, the afternoon tea, the local pub, and introduce this creeping, unavoidable doom right into the middle of it.
And our guide through this creeping doom is the narrator, Bill Sampson. And he's not a hardened space marine.
No, not at all.
He's not some super scientist with a microscope and a master plan to save the world. The notes describe him as an everyman figure. Specifically, he's a comic book artist.
Yeah, just a normal guy.
He's sitting in a pub called the Basket Maker's Arms in this fictional Wiltshire town of Brockledene, and he's just there with his Great Dane Seek. He's literally just a guy drawing pictures and hanging out with his massive dog.
And, making the protagonist an artist is a really highly specific mechanical choice for the narrative.
How so?
Because an artist is professionally trained to be an observer. Bill Sampson's internal monologue is very dry, it's unassuming, and it's heavily focused on visual details.
Ah, right, so he sees everything.
Exactly. It allows the reader to witness the horrors through a lens that processes all these apocalyptic changes meticulously, but without any special skills to actually combat them.
I love that. He can draw the end of the world, but he can't shoot his way out of it.
Exactly, which makes him so relatable.
Which kind of brings me to the psychological reality of that newspaper clipping scene.
Mm,
Bill sees the report of the arm-sized wasp in Dorset. It's an undeniable anomaly. It's completely bizarre.
right.
And Bill basically just shrugs it off. He actively dismisses it as a strange, isolated event. And reading through your notes, it immediately made me think of sensory adaptation.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Like if you live next to an elevated train track, the first week is an absolute nightmare. You can't sleep. But after a month, your brain literally filters out the noise of the train to protect your sanity.
Right, it just becomes background noise.
Exactly. And Bill Sampson is doing the exact same thing with the end of the world.
He really is. He is filtering out the ambient noise of the apocalypse just to maintain his own equilibrium. The notes really highlight how Roberts uses this inciting incident not as a sudden break in reality, but as, like, the first drop of water breaching the dam.
Just a little trickle.
Yeah, and then more reports start to trickle in. Cattle get mutilated. There are strange buzzing sounds in the distance. The military starts cordoning off entire counties.
It's so familiar, though. It's the modern equivalent of doom scrolling.
No, absolutely.
You're in a coffee shop, right? You pull out your phone, and right between a photo of your friend's dog and some funny meme video, there's a headline about a massive ice shelf collapsing.
Or a new untreatable virus.
Or a proxy war escalating.
Mhm.
And what do? We swipe past it, we take a sip of our latte, and we completely compartmentalize the horror.
Because we have to.
We do. We want so desperately to believe the world is safe, so we actively ignore the structural cracks that are forming right in front of our faces.
And that compartmentalization, that is the true coziness of the catastrophe. It's an illusion sustained entirely by denial.
Wow, yeah.
Roberts establishes this incredibly mundane, comfortable world to show the baseline of absolute normality. You establish the illusion of safety, you introduce a tiny anomaly, and you let the protagonist's denial slowly crumble as the anomaly scales up into an unavoidable reality.
So the cracks in the peaceful English countryside widen really slowly at first.
Exactly, which allows the psychological terror to build long before the physical terror actually arrives on our doorstep.
So humanity is just sitting in the pub, ignoring the cracks. But eventually, the train noise gets way too loud to ignore. The threat stops being a tiny clipping from Dorset and becomes an all-encompassing nightmare.
Yeah, the dam finally breaks.
Right, and the notes dive into the exact mechanics of how these creatures, the Furies, actually arrive. And I gotta say, this is where the 1960s B-movie flavor really takes over.
It really does. The catalyst for the invasion is so deeply steeped in the geopolitical anxieties of that era. The text explains that America and Russia, who are, locked in the perpetual escalation of the Cold War, they decide to conduct simultaneous, unimaginably massive H-bomb tests.
Because of course they do. What could go wrong?
Right. And these tests are so phenomenally powerful that they literally rupture the Earth's crust all the way down to the seabed.
Just crack the planet like an egg.
Pretty much. And this geological trauma somehow opens a pathway or triggers the arrival of these space-spawn Furies.
Okay, I want to stop right here and look at the hard science of this. Because the notes have a specific section analyzing the scientific accuracy, and man, the verdict is absolutely brutal.
Oh, it's completely non-existent.
The biology of man-sized wasps is just pure fantasy. The notes call it an unexplained phenomenon. And I think we should explain to you, the listener, why it's so bogus, because it comes down to basic physics and insect anatomy, specifically this thing called the square cube law.
Right. The square cube law is the ultimate enemy of the giant monster movie.
It ruins everything fun.
It really does. Because as a shape grows in size, its volume grows much faster than its surface area.
Exactly. Like, think about an ant. An ant is incredibly strong for its size. It can lift, 50 times its body weight?
Yeah, something like that.
But if you scaled an ant up to the size of an elephant, its mass would increase by the cube of the multiplier, while the cross-sectional area of its legs, the thing supporting it, would only increase by the square.
So its legs would literally just snap under its own immense weight.
Instantly. And the exoskeleton, which is made of chitin, would have to be so incredibly thick just to support the internal organs, that there wouldn't be any room left inside for the organs themselves.
Right, it's structurally impossible. And then
No.
beyond that, there is the respiration problem.
Oh, right. How they breathe.
Yeah, because insects do not have lungs like mammals do. They have an open circulatory system and they breathe through spiracles.
Which are like tiny holes on their sides.
Exactly. Tiny holes along their abdomen that let oxygen diffuse passively into their tissues through this network of tracheal tubes.
But passive diffusion only works over microscopic distances, right?
Exactly. If a wasp is the size of a man's arm, the oxygen simply cannot travel deep enough into the body tissue fast enough to keep the cells alive.
So an arm-sized wasp wouldn't be this terrifying apex predator. It would just lie on the ground and suffocate in about 5 minutes.
You'd just be gasping on the floor, yeah. And as for the geology, the idea that simultaneous H-bombs crack the seabed to let in space wasps, the notes dismiss it entirely. They just call it a convenient device.
So from a hard science fiction perspective, it's totally unworkable.
Hmm.
But that leads me to my biggest question. If the science is so completely bogus, if it defies biology, geology, and basic physics, why does the story still work so well for the reader? Like, why doesn't it just fall flat?
Well, because it's not a biology textbook.
Okay.
It's a morality play wearing a sci-fi trench coat.
Ooh, I like that.
The implausible science is just a delivery mechanism for a really profound thematic reality. You have to contextualize this within the 1960s.
The Cold War era.
Yeah. The existential dread of nuclear annihilation was just the ambient background radiation of everyday life. I mean, the Cuban Missile Crisis had just shown the world exactly how close to the brink we really were.
People were building bomb shelters in their backyards.
Exactly. And the fear wasn't just that the bombs would kill us, it was the sheer hubris of humanity playing with the fundamental building blocks of the universe.
And the notes call this theme cosmic retribution. The Furies aren't just big bugs. They are a direct, physicalized metaphor for industrialism and a punishment for humanity's nuclear arrogance.
Right.
We took our geopolitical posturing to the absolute limit. We cracked the Earth open. And instead of just getting fallout, the universe looked at us and basically said, oh, you think you're the masters of creation. Let me introduce you to the real apex predator.
Notice the really subtle ideological shift Roberts implements here, too. The H-bomb represents the pinnacle of human technological achievement, right? The ultimate dominance of rational science.
Yeah, splitting the atom.
But the wasp represents primal nature. It's this ancient, instinctual, terrifyingly alien force. By having the ultimate technology inadvertently unleash the ultimate primal force, the text is making a really definitive statement about the limits of human control.
We aren't in charge at all.
No, we are not the masters of the house. We are just loud tenants who accidentally knocked down a load-bearing wall.
That is a terrifying way to put it, but so accurate. So the convenient device of the seabed cracking is really just the door swinging open.
Exactly.
And what comes through that door completely short-circuits humanity's primary defense mechanisms. This moves us into the phase of the notes titled The Fall of Brockledine. The anomalous reports turn into a full-scale eruption across the British landscape.
And this is where things get really grim.
Yeah, because the most terrifying trait of the Furies isn't their size. And it's not their stingers. According to the text, it's their intelligence.
The notes emphasize that they possess a terrifying intelligence. And this is the element that really elevates the story from a simple monster attack into a psychological nightmare.
Right, because if they were just giant mindless bugs, the British military can probably handle them. You just treat them like a biological hazard.
Yeah, you build giant bug zappers.
Exactly. You use overwhelming artillery, you deploy chemical defoliants, but the text explicitly states they attack humans and larger animals on sight, and their intelligence makes them impossible to predict or evade effectively. They aren't just swarming blindly, they're hunting.
And we need to look at how insect intelligence fundamentally differs from human intelligence here, because that specific difference counters all of our military tactics.
That is so.
Well, human militaries in the 1960s operated on very strict hierarchical command structures. Generals give orders, colonels translate them to tactics, infantry execute them.
It's all top-down.
Right. It relies on communication lines, supply chains, and predictable human psychology. Like the idea that an enemy will retreat if they take heavy losses.
Because humans want to live.
Exactly. But social insects operate on a decentralized hive mind. They use pheromone communication. There is no central general for a sniper to assassinate.
Oh, wow.
There are no supply lines to bomb in the traditional sense. If a human battalion encounters heavy machine gun fire, they take cover and call for artillery.
Sure.
But if a swarm of highly intelligent, arm-sized wasps encounters a machine gun, thousands of them will blindly throw themselves into the fire just to exhaust the ammunition.
Just feeding bodies into the grinder because the individual doesn't matter.
Exactly. And while they do that, the rest of the swarm executes a flawless flanking maneuver guided entirely by chemical signals.
It completely neutralizes humanity's evolutionary advantage.
Right.
I mean, we dominate the planet because of our intelligence, our ability to coordinate, and our use of tools. But when you introduce a predator that matches our strategic intelligence, but operates with zero self-preservation instinct and this alien collective consciousness, our tools just become useless. A tank isn't a weapon anymore, it's just a metal box waiting to be pried open.
And because the military is built exclusively to fight other humans, it collapses almost instantly.
And I want to point out an observation here because the notes contrast Robert's approach to this collapse with other writers of the era, like John Christopher.
Yeah, a very different vibe.
In a typical disaster story, you get these sweeping scenes of the macro collapse. You get the prime minister in a bunker looking at radar, generals moving plastic pieces on a map, emergency broadcasts telling citizens where the safe zones are.
Right, the grand drama of societal breakdown.
But Roberts completely ignores the macro perspective. The notes highlight that he depicts very little of that high-level drama. Instead, the lens is terrifyingly claustrophobic. It is entirely zoomed in on Bill Sanson's visceral, desperate fight just to hide and scavenge.
And that narrative choice is brilliant, really, because it reinforces the vaporization of the social contract.
What do you mean by that?
Well, think about it. We obey laws, we pay taxes, and we adhere to societal norms because we fundamentally believe that the structure will protect us from the chaos of the natural world.
Right. Someone breaks into my house, I call the police.
Exactly. If the country is in danger, the army fights. The Furies violently severs that contract. When the military is instantly overrun by a superior alien intelligence, the realization sets in for Bill that the police aren't coming. The government is gone.
It strips away the illusion that our societal structures will save us. When the military fails instantly, you don't get politics. You just get feral desperation.
Which forces the narrative into a very dark exploration of the feral human.
Yeah. When the infrastructure vanishes, how quickly do people revert to a state of absolute savagery? I mean, yesterday, Bill was drinking a pint with his neighbors. Today, those exact same neighbors are a deadly threat.
The notes describe Bill watching his small town crumble as people flee in sheer panic or are just slaughtered in the streets.
In a primal fight for survival against an overwhelming force of nature, the veneer of civilization is revealed to be, like, paper thin.
It really is. When the immediate choice is between your own caloric intake and your neighbor's survival, and there is a swarm of intelligent predators hunting you both, morality just becomes a luxury you can't afford.
It strips away the comforting illusion we all hold about ourselves. We watch these apocalyptic movies and we all secretly cast ourselves as the noble survivor, right?
Oh, totally. We're the main character.
Right. We're the ones organizing the resistance, protecting the weak, rebuilding society. But Roberts is looking directly at the reader and saying, no, you wouldn't.
Yeah.
You would be hiding in a muddy ditch, ready to bludgeon a man you've known for 10 years over a tin of baked beans.
It is the reduction of the human being to a pure survival mechanism. We are no longer artists or farmers or citizens of a modern state. We are prey.
Just meat.
Yeah. And prey behaves in highly predictable, fundamentally desperate ways. The visceral horror the notes refer to isn't just the physical threat of the Furies, it is the psychological horror of what the human animal becomes when it is knocked off the top of the food chain.
And that psychological horror leads us right into the most grueling section of the text. The notes title this part, The Guerrilla War. We move from the acute initial shock of the invasion, the adrenaline-fueled panic of the fall of Brockledine, into the chronic, exhausting reality of long-term survival.
And that transition from acute panic to chronic terror is where the true weight of the novel really settles in. Because adrenaline can only sustain a human body for a few hours.
Right.
After that, exhaustion sets in, both physical and mental. You can't run forever.
So the narrative tracks Bill's journey as he's forced out of his ruined hometown. He maps this geographical progression of devastation across the English landscape, moving from the pastoral hills of Wiltshire all the way to the flooded, decaying remnants of London.
And the notes use a very specific phrase to describe Robert's writing in this section. They call it a documentary style.
A documentary style. Meaning, like, it's very clinical.
Crucially, yes, because it implies an absolute lack of melodrama. It is a cold, objective recording of grim facts. It doesn't dress up the violence with heroic music or dramatic speeches.
It just tells you how it is. Let's look at the mechanics of what that scavenging actually entails then. A documentary style means tracking the brutal mathematics of survival.
Right, the calorie counting.
Exactly. How many calories does Bill burn walking 10 miles through rough terrain while hypervigilant? How many calories are actually left in a ransacked grocery store?
Usually not many.
No. The text isn't focused on grand strategy. It's focused on the agonizing reality of trench foot, untreated water, and the constant gnawing fear of the buzzing in the sky. And the visual of flooded London is just staggering.
It's an incredible image.
The capital of the British Empire, the seat of centuries of global power, reduced to a swamp infested with giant, intelligent space wasps.
It is the ultimate visual representation of nature reclaiming human hubris. But I think the most significant aspect of this guerrilla war is what Roberts actively refuses to do. The notes are explicitly clear about the tropes that the Furies avoids.
And this is something I really want to push back on, or at least explore, because usually in these stories, the everyman on his harrowing journey eventually stumbles upon the silver bullet.
Right, the secret weakness.
Think about Signs, where the aliens who mastered interstellar travel turn out to be allergic to tap water. Or The War of the Worlds, where the unstoppable Martian war machines are brought down by the common cold.
There's always a hidden vulnerability that humanity exploits at the last possible second.
It's the Deus Ex Machina, right? The sudden miraculous resolution that validates human endurance.
Exactly.
But the notes highlight that there is no miracle cure here. No brilliant scientist emerges from a bunker with a biological weapon. There's no heroic final stand that turns the tide. Bill and the other survivors are explicitly described as hapless.
Hapless. That's a great word for it.
They aren't winning a guerrilla war. They are basically just losing it slightly slower than everyone else. So, from a purely structural standpoint, how does a writer keep a reader engaged if the protagonists are basically just losing slowly for hundreds of pages? Why doesn't the reader just put the book down?
Well, the reader stays engaged precisely because of that grim realism. If Roberts had introduced a miracle cure or a sudden arbitrary weakness in the Furies, it would have completely undermined the thematic weight of the cosmic retribution we discussed earlier.
Oh, because you can't cheat a cosmic punishment.
Exactly. If humanity fundamentally broke the world through its nuclear arrogance, a clever scientist shouldn't be able to just fix it in the third act with a modified pesticide.
Right. It would cheapen the entire setup. It would be like saying, yes, we destroyed the Earth, but we're so smart we easily fix the consequences.
Exactly. So the engagement for the reader doesn't come from the anticipation of total victory. It comes from the excruciating tension of micro-victories.
Micro-victories.
Success is completely recalibrated. It is no longer about taking back the country. It is about surviving the next hour. Did we find clean water today? That is a victory.
Did we avoid a patrol of Furies? That is a victory.
Exactly.
We made it to sunset. That becomes the entire human operating system.
And the tone of this final act is defined by that exhaustion. The reader is kept on the edge of their seat, not by wondering how Bill will defeat the insectoid menace, but wondering if his physical and mental fortitude will simply snap.
Will he just give up?
Right. Roberts forces the reader into the exact same psychological space as the survivors. It is a relentless, dispiriting account of survival against mathematically overwhelming odds, and that emotional honesty is deeply compelling.
You aren't reading a heroic fantasy where you can imagine yourself as the savior. You are reading a survival diary of a man being ground into dust.
And it strips all the glamour out of the post-apocalyptic fantasy. A lot of modern media treats the apocalypse as a reset button.
Oh yeah, a chance to be a cool lone wanderer with a shotgun and a leather jacket.
Exactly. But Roberts strips that away and says, no, you will be starving, you will be filthy, your teeth will hurt, you will be terrified of every single shadow, and eventually you will be exhausted beyond human comprehension.
And that exhaustion dictates exactly how the novel concludes. Which brings us to the ending of the book and its lasting legacy.
Yeah, the ending is fascinating.
As we follow Bill's harrowing micro-victory journey through the flooded ruins of London, we have to confront how a story so steeped in chronic terror ultimately resolves or fails to resolve. And the answer, according to the notes, is that it deliberately leaves things open.
And that deliberate ambiguity is arguably the text's most powerful narrative choice.
The notes specifically mention a character named Jane Felicity Beddoes Smythe. Her fate is left completely unknown. The reader invests in her journey, and then the narrative just cuts the thread.
Just severs it entirely.
We don't know if she lives. We don't know if she dies horribly. Roberts aggressively avoids any kind of neat, happy ending. Survival is never guaranteed, and closure is a total myth.
Let's contextualize this within the broader scope of literature and history, too. Because an unresolved ending is often the most authentic choice a writer can make when dealing with immense, catastrophic themes.
Because history rarely gives us a neat bow.
Exactly.
Look at real historical tragedies. When you study the Black Death or the collapse of the Bronze Age or the aftermath of major global conflicts, there isn't a final scene where a soaring orchestral score plays and everyone hugs.
No, millions of people are simply left dealing with unimaginable trauma.
Displaced in ruined landscapes, and countless fates are just lost to the chaotic void of history. To me, an unresolved ending makes the fictional human cost feel immense and terrifyingly real. A sudden artificial victory would just cheapen the millions who died in the earlier chapters.
It respects the magnitude of the disaster. If the Furies are, as the notes argue, a metaphor for industrialism and the profound arrogance of the 1960s nuclear age, then granting humanity an easy victory would imply that our hubris has no lasting permanent consequences.
It would suggest we can break the world and then just easily sweep up the pieces.
Right. By leaving the ending messy, unresolved, and open, Roberts refuses to let the reader off the hook. He forces you to sit with the deep discomfort of absolute human vulnerability.
And the final analysis in the notes summarizes the critical reception, and it captures this duality perfectly.
Yeah.
It's a story of ordinary people fighting an unwinnable war against an incomprehensible enemy. The notes call it a vision of a world turned upside down.
There's a reader review mentioned in the sources that I found incredibly striking, actually.
Oh, what did it say?
They wrote that the book is a lot of fun and the hero is a decent enough chap, but it also will stick with you.
That combination is exactly why The Furies remains such a significant, rewarding piece of apocalyptic science fiction. It lures the reader in with the pulpy B-movie premise of giant killer wasps and the cozy pastoral illusion of the English pub.
Right, the bait and switch.
Exactly. But once you're inside, it traps you in a visceral, psychologically exhausting meditation on what actually happens when humanity is violently knocked off its pedestal. It reminds us that our dominance over nature is largely an illusion, sustained only by fragile, highly complex structures that can vanish overnight.
It really is a dark, exhausting journey, but an incredibly illuminating one.
So just to recap the journey for you, the listener, we started in the basket maker's arms, sipping a pint in the peaceful sunshine, actively ignoring the tiny, anomalous clipping in the newspaper. We watched as the ultimate expression of human technological hubris cracked the earth, unleashing a force of nature that completely bypassed our hard science and preyed on our societal assumptions.
We witnessed the immediate, violent collapse of the social contract as militaries failed and neighbors turned feral in the pursuit of calories.
And finally, we trudged through the agonizing mathematics of a grim, unending guerrilla war in the flooded ruins of London, ending without closure, without victory, just the gnawing reality of survival.
And I think this proves exactly why exploring these older science fiction texts is so valuable. It is very easy to look at a 1960s novel about giant bugs and dismiss it as campy or outdated.
Oh, for sure. But doing so ignores the fact that these stories are time capsules of timeless human anxieties. The specific mechanism of the fear changes. In the 1960s, it was the H-bomb and the Cold War.
Right.
But the underlying terror remains constant. The fear of our own rapidly advancing technology outpacing our moral wisdom. The fear of nature striking back against our industrial exploitation.
And that deep-seated, quiet terror that our societal safety nets, the police, the supply chains, the hospitals, could simply dissolve under pressure.
Those anxieties are just as potent, just as relevant today as they were when Keith Roberts was writing.
The Furies were a punishment for humanity breaking the rules of nature with atomic weapons. They were the physical manifestation of ignored warnings.
Which leaves me with a final thought for you to chew on as we wrap up this deep dive. The core metaphor of the Furies relies on the idea that humanity's arrogance blinded them to the consequences of their actions. They were so focused on their geopolitical posturing that they didn't realize they were breaking the very earth they stood on.
Yeah.
And when the first warning signs appeared, a bizarre clipping about an arm-sized wasp in a neighboring county, they ordered another pint and changed the subject. Now, we don't have simultaneous H-bomb tests cracking the seabed right now.
Thank goodness.
Right. But we have our own modern equivalents of hubris. We have artificial intelligence rapidly scaling beyond our ability to fully contain or understand its emergent behaviors.
We have CRISPR gene editing becoming cheaper and more accessible, allowing us to rewrite the fundamental code of biology with totally unpredictable ecological consequences.
Exactly. We are playing with our own ultimate technologies. So look around at our own bucolic everyday lives. We are sitting in our own coffee shops, enjoying our own modern illusions of safety, scrolling on our phones. What is our modern newspaper clipping?
That's the real question.
What small, seemingly isolated threat nestled right there between a meme and an ad are we swiping past and actively ignoring right now, right before our own modern hubris finally catches up with us?